So Michal, I'm sorry that we're meeting together in these times, but very grateful for you making the time to share your powerful story. You're an incredible teacher. You've done shlichut. You've gone overseas for 7 years to Boca and brought up an amazing family. But today you're wearing a very specific hat. You're the sister of Moshe. You're the auntie of Eliad. Two Giborei Israel, two heroes of our people. They died on the 7th of October, the day that changed the world forever. Take us back to that moment when you heard the news. How did they die and what happened to you at that moment?
That morning, my husband went to shul, and about half an hour after he came back home, turned my phone and handed it to me and said, the rabbi said things are going on, and to turn on the phone so we were all alert of what's happening. We were not really sure what's happening, but I already saw messages coming in. Now, I have a sister who lives very close to the border in Gaza, and we were very worried about them. So as the messages were running, I was trying to screen what's going on, and she wrote a lot of harsh things. Usually she says we're under attack, bombing or whatever, and we're just in the safe room. And she wrote horrible things are happening. Terrorists have invaded our area. And my brother from Ofakim, which is 25 kilometers from Gaza, wrote, they are here as well. Okay? He wrote that at 7:10 in the morning.
This is a family WhatsApp group. They're both right.
Family WhatsApp group.
Wow. So one from the border in the south and the other from Ofakim.
Right. And they're all writing at the same time. Obviously, we didn't know what to do. So I left the house and went to my sister who lives next door. My parents were there for Simchat Torah. As I went there, my mother was already sitting and crying, I've lost my son. I said, Ima, what are you talking about? Why do you think that? And she said, I've tried calling him and he's not answering my phone. I said, Ima, it's Simchat Torah. Obviously he's not answering your phone. She said, my son respects me so much that even if I'll phone him on Yom Kippur, he'll pick up my phone. He will pick up the phone and answer me. And if he's not answering me, something went wrong. And the second thing she said was, I know my children. I educated you to always be first, to always reach out to people in need. I know he went out first. And as the day progressed, we tried to gain information, but it's Chag, so we didn't really make phone calls or whatever. We just tried to see who was responding on the group, and he didn't respond. So we waited. On Motzei Shabbat, Motzei Simchat Torah, my sister-in-law phoned us and said that my brother and his son are missing. But there's some information that they might have joined the army forces. She said they have left the house after the first set of sirens, and they told her they're going to get the keys for the shelters in Ofakim to open all the shelters so people have places to go to. On a regular day, the shelters in Ofakim are locked. As I said, Ofakim is 25 kilometers from Gaza. The shelters are open only when the military sends messages of concrete information that there's going to be bombing, and then they open the shelters. There was no such information, and the shelters were all locked. So my brother broke into the first shelter that is next to his house, helped a family go into the shelter. That family said to him, please stay with us. We're safe here and we will feel safer if you stay with us. He said to them, I'm going to open the other shelters and I'll be back to check on you. He walked back home, said to his wife, I'm going to get the keys. And his son, his 23-year-old son, the second out of 5, said, Abba, I will come with you. I will drive for you. And the two of us can open them faster. So the oldest son said, I will come as well. And the father said, you know what, you'll go with the neighbor. We'll split the city into areas and we'll just do it quickly. So he left first with his second son, Eliad. And Amitai, the oldest son, left with a neighbor. Amitai was running back and forth all day as he was offering medical aid under fire to the people at the battle, not knowing that his father and brother already died in the street over. So Motzei Shabbat, we declared them missing. Sunday morning, a family friend that was a high officer in the army came down to Ofakim and said the country is in chaos at the moment. And I think the best thing to do will be to try and track them ourselves. And they leave the house following their steps, trying to figure out what happened. And they enter an area, the Rehov Chita in Ofakim. That's the area where Rachel Edry, the lady that had been a hostage in our house with a terrorist, that's the same street she lives on. Another family, the Bilia family, that evacuated through the back window. The main battle took place there. As they drove there, they saw my brother's vehicle. And they were driving back and forth on that street, but they couldn't find anything. Apparently, the bodies have already been removed from the area. So we were informed officially that on Sunday at 2:00, we were informed that they were both dead. The person that informed us is a neighbor from that street, from Chita Street in Ofakim. He said that on Shabbat morning, he left his house to partake in a brit that was taking place at the same time at a shul, a small shul at the end of the street, a shul that is placed in the shelter. As he walked out of his house, he saw an IDF soldier. He waved to him. He wanted to invite it to the bris, or to the Simchat Torah parade that they have in Ofakim. And he said at that moment, the person wearing IDF uniform was aiming a gun at my head. He said it took a split second for me to understand that this is not a soldier, that it's a terrorist. For some reason, he said, there was a problem with the terrorist's weapon. He said, I used that split of a second to run. But that moment, I saw Moshe shooting the terrorist. We don't know exactly how or what. My brother drove towards the exit of town to get the keys. 300 meters from his house was the place that the terrorists started killing people. The first thing they did, the terrorists, is that, as I said, they were wearing IDF uniforms. They walked to people's houses and rang their doorbells, saying, this is Simchat Torah. People will obviously be more than happy to open the door to a soldier. Those who opened the door died. The second thing the terrorists did is Ofakim, as I said, is placed 25 kilometers from the border in Gaza. All open fields, agriculture, farms. The terrorists drove in a white pickup trucks, in two white pickup trucks that had Israeli license plates that they obviously stole or manufactured. So nobody thought anything of it. They did not enter the first neighborhood in Ofakim. They entered the second neighborhood. The first neighborhood is a brand new neighborhood that my brother helped build 10 years ago. All the people there have mamad in their house, safe rooms in their houses. The second neighborhood is a much older neighborhood. Nobody has a safe room at home. And under rockets, they have to come out to the miklat, to the shelters. As they heard the siren and walked out of their houses to the shelters, the first line of people was slaughtered. And my brother apparently arrived around that time. He killed the first terrorist. He yelled to his son that was in the car, Eliad, go to the Bilia family. My brother was 2 houses away from the Bilia family. He knew the Bilia family for a long, long time, as they lost their father at a very young age. 4 brothers lost their father at a very young age. And my brother made sure to support the amazing mother, to support her in raising them, to be another male figure for them. So that morning he shouted to his son, go to the Bilia family. We don't know if he shouted it in order to warn them, or because 2 of them grew to be members of the social of the Malchot Bitchoniyot. Both sons worked for security services. So we don't know if he asked the son to go warn them or to go call upon them to also fight the terrorists. But we do know that at one point the son shouts, my father is down. And he ran to his father, and a terrorist sniper was already placed on the roof, already managed to climb the roof, and he shot my nephew. So my brother died from a clean bullet to his head, and my nephew died from a clean bullet to his heart. And when he fell down hugging his father.
It's crazy. It's really, there's no words to be able to say to that. But I wonder when you heard the story, when you heard the news, how did you feel as an auntie? How did you feel as a sister? How did you feel in this moment?
Because of what happened with my mother, that she said, I have a gut feeling that my son is no longer with me, then we had some sort of preparation. And because they were declared missing, and because the oldest son, Amitai, was in the battle and offered medical help, and he was back, we realized something went horribly wrong. So we had some sort of mental preparation. And thanks to that kind person that took a picture of the bodies on Simchat Torah, because he was afraid that the terrorists will burn the bodies or anything of that sort, he took a picture. So by Sunday afternoon, 2:00, we knew. Obviously, it's a shattering moment. For every person, to lose a loved one is a shattering moment. But for us, Moshe is the first child of 7. He's the first grandchild. He's named after my grandfather that died a month before my father's bar mitzvah. Moshe died 2 months before his son's bar mitzvah. We're having the bar mitzvah tomorrow. So to have the same story occur to our family twice is extremely difficult. My father was an officer in the army when we were kids. He was out of the house for long periods at a time. We lived in a moshav. We had our own farm work. So every morning my mother would go and take care of farm work, and my brother will prepare us for school. We are 5 sisters after him. And every morning he will braid our hair. We had long hair, and he would braid our hair and help us choose the right clothes and give us nice breakfast. So for us, it was just a lot more than just an older brother. And because he grew up to be a leader, a well-known person, hundreds and thousands of people were looking up to him. But for us, he's still our brother. And as far as Eliad, his son, Eliad was a very unique person. At the age of 14, he decided, along with his parents and his high school principal, that he no longer has to attend classes. He's bored. He is autodidact. He can teach himself almost everything. So he no longer has to attend classes. He has to do all the exams along with all the other students. But instead of sitting in the class and studying, he's going to donate his time to volunteer with handicapped kids. So at the age of 14, Eliad starts volunteering with handicapped children. Later on, we understand that he volunteered at 10 different organizations at the same time. And each one of them thought he was the best volunteer. He volunteered with kids battling cancer, with kids that were born with severe handicaps, with kids that suffer mental disabilities, and many, many others. When Eliad was 18, he bought a car, but he didn't have the money to buy a car. So he did what he used to do. Call some family member, say, we are doing something together. So he called his older brother, Amitai, that as you can hear, has a big share of older doings, and said, Amitai, we are buying a car. And Amitai said, what do you mean? He said, you are paying and I'm driving. And Amitai said, fine, we can do that. And when Amitai came to see the car, he realized that Eliad, an 18-year-old boy, is buying a station wagon. And he said, Eliad, that's not a car for an 18-year-old. It's a car for a family. Why would you buy such a car? And he said, I measured. I can fit 4 wheelchairs at the back of my car. And he called the car my hero, because the hero will bring happiness and joy to handicapped kids. And he used every spare minute that he had, 2, 3 in the morning. Somebody will call and he will be there for them. They want to do something different now, to go to the trip in the Kinneret, to see the sunrise in Metzadah. Whatever it is, he will make that dream come true. Another small story about Eliad. As a young soldier, he served at the Air Force. But he was not a pilot. He was a driver for heavy machinery. He heard that at the base where he is serving at the moment, there's going to be a ceremony for the pilots, those who finished the training to become pilots, and they're doing a ceremony. He had a thought that he wants to bring handicapped kids to the ceremony. So he approached the head of the base and said, I would like to bring 50 handicapped kids, to celebrate with the pilots. And the officer said, obviously we cannot do that. The ceremony needs security clearance. People have to go through screening. We have everybody, all the details months in advance. We can't just bring kids within 3 days to this ceremony. And then Eliad said, great, so you prepare the paperwork and I'll be back in about half an hour. And the officer said, Eliad, I'm not sure you've heard me. I said, it's impossible. And Eliad said, I've heard you. I'm going to make it possible. And he called his father and said, Abba, how are we going to do this? And his father said, at the moment, I'm busy organizing Ve'idat HaTanach HaOlamit, the International Bible Conference at the President's house here in Israel. So I'll give you a phone number of one of my friends. He was a high officer in the Air Force. Ask him what to do. And this tiny 18-year-old guy calls this high officer in the army and says, my father gave me your number, and he said, you can help. He told him the whole story, and the person said, I will help you get 5 kids in. And then Eliad said, you meant 50. And the person said, Eliad, 5 is pushing enough. I'm using a lot of my personal connection for 5. And Eliad answered, my officer said, none. You're saying 5. If there's a way for 5, we're going to find a way for 50. And the friend said, I'll give you the number of the head of the Air Force. He owes me some favors, personal favors. Ask him what he can do. And this 18-year-old guy calls the Israeli head of the Air Force, the head of the Israeli Air Force, and says, this is my plan. I want to bring 50 handicapped kids to the pilot ceremony. And I will convince you that this is the right thing to do, because you're educating the pilots to be the best society can have. And the best means to look and care for the weaker ones in the population. So you're not doing that as a favor for the handicapped kids. You're doing it as part of the education of the best pilots we have. And the head of the Air Force said, I don't know why we haven't thought about this before. So it didn't take half an hour. It took 3 hours. But the paperwork got done. And after 3 hours, the head of the base calls Eliad and said, Eliad, I don't know what you did. I don't know who you are. You're just a young soldier. But you have permission to bring 50 handicapped kids to the ceremony. And Eliad said, you meant to bring them for the day. And the head of the base says, no, we said just the ceremony. He says, you can't bring 50 kids to the ceremony. You have to bring them before and prepare them. So we're going to make a fun day out of it. And we're going to bring them for the whole day, and we'll take them around the base and show them what the pilots do. We're going to show them the aircrafts and everything. And know what? I'll find a donor to donate shirts for them. And on the day of the ceremony, all the 50 kids had an incredible fun day. And as the president sat down and the prime minister, they're all seated, and Eliad marches in with his 50 kids and sits them before the president before the head of the Air Force, before the head of the Army, and says, "Sorry, there were no arrangements for wheelchairs, so we're just going to sit here." That's the kind of person he was. He never heard the word no. For him, there were no boundaries in the way of making handicapped kids happy. No boundaries. At a very, very young age of 22, he already was in charge of a medical trip of 300 people, kids battling cancer, their families, and the volunteers that work with them, for a week in Disney. So his death is not just a small personal loss, even though a personal loss is never small. But he had extreme levels of simcha. He was incredibly happy person. So when my nephew Amitai came to tell my parents about the death, he held my mother's hand and said, "Savta, nobody has the ability to be as happy as Eliad. So I'm giving you 10%. And he told every one of us in the family, each one has to hold a percent of Eliad's happiness and of Eliad's doing. So we're all part of what he did. We all have to maintain his legacy."
Oh, what a special person. It's so sad that our best were taken so young, but it seems like in his first 2 decades of his life, he lived a full lifetime, was able to give so much.
When Miriam Peretz came for a Shiva call to pay condolences, and she said an incredible thing that gave my parents and the rest of the family a lot of strength. She said, "Never say that they died young. Say that they lived full life really fast."
Beautiful. And there's nothing truer to say than about Eliad and about Moshe. You said, share these beautiful things about Eliad. I had the privilege to meet Moshe actually when I was doing work for 929. And first of all, I understand regarding Eliad that they were actually hosting that Simchat Torah, that Shabbat, 80 people, 40 of whom were disabled. So it's incredible that through, even in their last day, they were living that legacy. But I'd love if you could share a little bit about Moshe, who's obviously very well known in the Israeli community for, so they say Moshe Emet veTorato Emet. Moses was truth and his Torah was truth. And he was instrumental in bringing Tanakh, the Bible, to literally tens of thousands of people, not just in Israel, but around the world. Give us an insight into who he was, what he did, and what his legacy is.
I don't think there are enough words in the world to sum my brother. But many years ago, when Moshe was in training to become a paratrooper officer, he was interviewed. And the person who interviewed him asked him, "What will happen if you won't be able to complete your dream to become a paratrooper officer?" And he said, "Am Israel needs us in so many places. If I can't contribute as an officer, I will find my way to contribute to the nation." Unfortunately, due to medical condition, he had to leave the army. And he decided to contribute and do for the nation in many other ways. So as a young couple, Moshe, his wife Sarit, and his son Amitai moved to Ofakim. 24 years ago, Ofakim was a very nice city, yet a bit weaker on the social economical background. Moshe then is part of a Garin Torani, a group of families that are deciding to bring more Torah studies into Ofakim and to do chesed within the community. Moshe realized that it's not just to come as a person from the outside and say, this is what needs to be done. Rather, he decided to find the leaders from within the community. So he's establishing a leadership program for the youth in Ofakim. Part of that leadership program is that the teenagers themselves volunteer with younger kids that the parents, for some sort of reason, cannot have the kids at home after school, either because they work and there's nobody to care for them, either due to lack of money, they can't provide warm meals. So Moshe established aftercare programs for those kids. And the volunteers are the teenagers themselves. And then he says, I have 500 kids that I need to find them warm meals. And he approaches the army and says, you have an Air Force base right outside of Ofakim. I know you have a lot of surplus on the food you cook. Please give me that surplus and I'll divide it to those children. But he didn't want them to feel that they're charitable families. He wanted them to feel that they're getting this food because they deserve it. So he made them pay a shekel a day at the beginning. So it's not a charity. They're actually paying for it. And the second thing he did was that each family had to take turns in packing the food and washing the dishes to be sent back to the army. So they actually took action, taking care of themselves. And that grew into many other projects in Ofakim and outside of Ofakim. Mandel organization, the amazing Mandel family, approached Moshe and say, come study at Mandel Organization for Educational Leadership in Yerushalayim. We will pay you a scholarship to come study here. And they did. And after studying there, they decided that Moshe has enough characters to lead a program. And they asked him, what does he think should be done for the nation next? And Moshe says, we need a social leadership academy. And the Mandel Organization is establishing a social leadership academy in Haifa. Moshe lives in Ofakim. And for 7 years, he drives back and forth.
Just for those
from
who don't know, how far is the drive?
About 2.5 hours each way.
Crazy.
So 5 hours a day driving. But he decided that it's not healthy to drive 5 hours a day. He can allocate that time to volunteering. So he buys a car that waits for him in Ofakim at the train station. At the beginning it was in Beersheba. And the Mandel car is parked in Haifa, the train station there. And the whole time on the train, he works. He works in creating other organization, an organization called Generation and a Half, that is working for over 10 years at the moment, where young teenagers meet elders in Israel and hear their amazing life stories. He did that because sometimes teenagers don't think very highly of elders. And he wanted them to know that behind every elder, there's an outstanding story. And each person in Israel has some contribution that he contributed for the benefit of the nation. And if the teenagers will see that, they'll respect the elders. And also, it will help the elders with their loneliness. They will no longer be lonely because teenagers will come visit them. So it's a win-win game for everybody. Then he works for another organization called Shachrit. Shachrit is an organization that is based on finding the common ground between all the Jews around the world and all the citizens of Israel. Jews, Arabs, Muslims, Christians, Druze, Bedouin, and all, finding the common ground. From that organization, he started something new, another part called Sukkot Shel Shalom. And during this Sukkot, he organized 200 Sukkot around the country, where people simply come and speak to each other, get to know each other. Each lecture will be given by two people from two extremes, either right wing and left wing, either Sephardi and Ashkenazi, and a lady and a male, a teenager and a professor. So communities will start getting to know other communities. There were 200 Sukkots like this during the last Sukkot. The last one was at his house on Hoshana Rabbah. So on Hoshana Rabbah, he had the day before he passed away. He hosted the last Sukkot Shalom at his house. And the morning of Simchas Torah, he hosted the 40 handicapped kids and 40 shepherdess. All of these jobs were his volunteering. His paid job was 9 to 9, the international organization for Bible studies and Bible accessibility to all. Moshe said that the world received a beautiful gift that is called Tanakh, the Bible. And unfortunately, over the last 2 decades, we kind of lost interest. Everyone, Jews, Christians, everybody lost some interest in the Bible, some of the connection. And he said, my job is to give the world the gift of Bible again. And that's what he did for the past 3 years. He worked closely with Rabbi Benji. He worked closely with the president. When the president came to pay condolences, he said to us 2 things. He said the first thing is, I feel sorry for Hashem for taking Moshe and Eliad at the same time. He doesn't know what's going to be in Shemaim. They're going to start driving him crazy. We have this project for the nation and the other project for the nation. He said at our meetings, Moshe would come up with new ideas every week. And I would say, Moshe, wait a second, we're just working on one project. And he would say, no, there is so much that needs to be done and time is short. The last circumstances in Israel, the constant disagreement between different parts of population have hurt him immensely. And he wanted to allocate every minute of his day to change that. And he truly did. That's the first thing the president said. And the second thing he said was that he studied something from my brother, from Moshe Ofakim. He said we would sit in meetings of important people from around the country and around the world. But if one of the parents called, one of your parents, Moshe would stop everything and say, sorry, Mr. President, but my mother and my father are above all. And that's the reason my mother said, if he doesn't answer my call, even on Simchat Torah, I know something went horribly wrong.
I'm just trying to comprehend I didn't even think you could have been talking about the same person when you started to list initiative after initiative. It's unbelievable what he achieved in such a short time. But it's really an inspiration to us all, and I know that every single one of those initiatives will continue way beyond him, and through them his legacy will continue. Is there any message you have for Am Yisrael at this time, after you suffered this terrible loss, after you speaking to groups and to news agencies around the world, both as a teacher and just as a mother, as a sister, as an auntie, as a citizen of Israel and the Jewish people? What message do you have for us?
I'll tell you something, another small story about my brother. He decided that every bar mitzvah kid in the family will have a year of preparation. Ha'am, HaTorah ve'Haaretz, the nation, the Torah, and the land. And each one of his kids and our kids, all the grandchildren in the family, had a year of preparation. The nation was volunteering. The Torah, each one chose a topic to study, either Mishnah or Gemara or whatever they chose to study. And the land, Amitai, the oldest son, did Chotzei Israel for his bar mitzvah. That is an incredible, challenging trip. But they did it, most of it. Eliad decided that he wants to do something else. He wants to study about Rabbi Aryeh Levin. And for his bar mitzvah, he took us all to a day trip in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem.
To the jails?
To the jail, to the house of Rabbi Aryeh Levin, to the Kotel. He did his Anachat Tefillin at the Kotel. And he spoke to us about Rabbi Aryeh Levin. And at the party itself, he gave out a magnet with a saying that Rabbi Aryeh Levin used to say. Rabbi Aryeh Levin was a short person. So he used to say, my kind Jew, I see only to your heart, and your soul makes me very happy. If we will all learn to simply look into the soul, we'll find a lot of common ground. We all pray for peace, religious and non-religious, right-wing and left-wing. We all pray for health. We all pray for prosperity. If we understand that that's the strongest common ground, and if we understand that as Jews we have enough enemies on the outside, and it's our obligation for the generations to come to stand together. Every Jew around the world has the responsibility for arvut adadit, for caring for each other. If we remember that and continue the amounts of chesed that we see during the time of the war, I'm sure that we will win, and even more so, we will prevail.
Beautiful. And I think it's 100% true. There's nothing we need now more than just to look at each other's hearts, look at each other's souls, and to connect. Because unfortunately, we had to be reminded from the outside of this important message, and now it's upon us to take it from the inside. So Michal, is there any final message or any other anecdote or anything you want to share before we conclude?
Yes, I would like to say something that my brother used to say. 2 sentences. One is, people used to ask him, how do you feel today? He said the same as yesterday, just a bit better. It's up to us to be that a bit better. It's our responsibility to make every day count. And the second thing he used to say is, leadership is just to identify a need and work for a solution. So we all identify now the need to be strong together. Let's hope we stay strong together.
Amen, Michal. Well, you're a symbol of that strength, of that leadership, and of that becoming better day by day. And I hope this conversation inspires everyone that merits to listen to it, to take a leaf out of your book, and to learn from Eliad, to learn from Moshe, and to honor their memory through what they do in this world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.